If you just did this one thing on the digital SAT, you can maximize your reading and writing score. Now, when I was studying for the GMAT, I was struggling on the verbal section. I was doing a ton of practice problems and a ton of practice tests, but didn't see any results or improvement in my verbal score. It wasn't until I started doing this one thing that my score completely changed. It actually took me from a 34 verbal score to a 44 verbal score. And for those that don't know, a 44 is a very good score on the GMAT for the verbal section. This one thing also allowed me to only miss one question on the digital SAT. Now, this one thing is bridging the knowledge gap on missed questions. You want to go take as many practice problems and practice tests as you can, but every single time you come across a problem that you missed or you guessed on, or you made an educated guess and got it correct, you want to make sure you understand why every single answer choice is either the right one, which is there's only one, and why the other three are wrong. And in doing so, you're only going to practice and learn the things that you have a gap on and create that bridge so you can go from not knowing all the way to knowing. Now, for the digital SAT, the reading and writing section has two main things that you're going to need to know. A big portion, 34% of the test roughly, is going to have questions related to grammar. So you're going to need to know punctuation, question mark, apostrophes. You're going to need to know sentences versus not a sentence. What's a fragment? How to combine sentences, so on and so forth. In fact, I've got a list right here showing all the things that you're going to need to know on the reading and writing section for the digital SAT. And the other questions are going to be related to what's the big picture of the text, complete the text, strengthen or weaken an argument, look at a graph or a chart, what is a vocabulary word that you should use here, so on and so forth. And again, I have a list right here of the different types of questions that are also tested in the reading and writing section of the digital SAT. Now, instead of going through and trying to memorize everything, the approach that I like to take with myself and my students is we go through the practice problems, we go through every answer choice and say why it's wrong or why it's right. And in doing that, we realize, oh, I don't really know this that well, or I don't know it at all. And then we bridge that knowledge gap. Or we realize, oh, I know that. I know the answer to that. I don't need to go back and relearn it or ingrain it more in my head because I'm getting all these answers right in that subject. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through one problem for each question type on the digital SAT for the reading and writing section and kind of show you what my process is like. Because it's my opinion that this process is more valuable to you than just throwing a bunch of rules like every other video, like every other textbook, and it's gonna end up just going over your head or you're glossing over it. I think that this system allows you to be more efficient and effective with your studying time because at the end of the day, we only have so many hours in one day that we can devote to studying, so we wanna make them count. So if you look at this question here, this is a vocab question. We need to understand what word best fits in the blank that conveys the message that this passage is trying to send to us. So let's take a look. So we talk about here which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word phrase. So if I look at the blank, before it says that someone doesn't have a definite idea of when something might happen. And after it says that humans will someday need to be able to live in other environments. And then the last sentence is important because it says, this conjecture informs her interest in future research missions to the moon. So what this is saying is that someone has an idea and thinks that humans will someday need to be able to live somewhere else. And because of this thought, it makes them want to do future research on missions to the moon. So let's take a look at the answer choices. It says A, demands. Demands doesn't really fit with the tone of this message here. So for that reason, I'm getting it out. Speculates, she speculates that humans will someday need to be. Okay, well, speculate is like, I think that we'll need to do this, but I'm not 100% certain. That could work, so let's keep that. C, doubts. We can for sure toss that away because if you're doubting that we'll need to be someday living somewhere else, then why would you be interested in traveling to the moon or doing research on traveling to the moon? So get rid of C. And then establishes. If you don't know what establishes is and you were just between speculates or establishes, then you would need to really put those words in the blank and see which one sounds better in the sense of like contextually speaking. But in this case, we know that establishes means that you know for a fact based on a research or a factoid that this is true. And what she's saying is that she doesn't know 100% when something will happen or if we're going to need to, but she does think that we're probably going to need to. So for that reason, I'm getting rid of D. B is indeed our answer. And again, for the vocab type of questions, reading news articles, Google articles, whatever, Reuters, New York Times, whatever you like to read research-wise or news-wise, reading that, and then when you come across a word you don't know, figuring out what that word is, that can help you for the vocab section, because if you know more words, that's going to help you in this section. If you know less words, you're gonna have to use more context clues. You're gonna have to finesse your way to the right answer more than if you just know what a bunch of words mean. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the next type of question. So this next type of question is a big picture question. Essentially, there's a passage. You need to explain what the big picture, what the main idea is. And then you need to read the answer choices to see which one of those matches best with what the big picture is for the passage. So let's take a look at this next question. So for the sake of time, I'm not gonna read all of this, but we do know that someone realized something. Then here, they created it. And then here, it talks about the creation and its results and kind of what it was used for. So the main purpose of this text is what? So if we look at A, to discuss Von Ann's invention of reCAPTCHA, that does make sense. It talks about who he was, the problem, what he created, and then afterwards. So we can keep that. B is to explain how digital scanners work. That doesn't really capture the essence of the passage because it's talking about more things than just how digital scanners work. So for that reason, it's out. C, to call attention to Von Ann's book digitizing project. So yes, it is calling attention to it, but is that the main idea? Not necessarily. It talks about more than just the book digitizing project itself. It's talking about the solution he created to a problem and how that solution works. And then D, to indicate how popular reCAPTCHA is, it's talking about more than just the popularization of his project, right? It's telling a more complete story around it. So for that reason, it's out. And A is our correct answer for this question. Now, again, if you weren't sure, if you were down to a 50-50, what I like to do is what you saw here. In the passage, I like to summarize chunks of sentences and kind of convey what are they talking about? What do they mean? So when I look at my answer choices, I can see kind of the flow of the passage and see which answer choices best fits that. Let's go ahead and look at the next question. So this next type of question is a function question. Usually something will be underlined and it'll say, how is this being used in the passage? So as always, we want to read the question first and then go back to the passage to look for exactly what the question is asking us to look for. Which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole? So we go straight to the underlined portion. We go ahead and read it and we see what it's talking about there. Now, by itself, we don't really know how it's functioning. So we need to read before and after. So we're talking about Lily, no intimacy with nature, but she had a passion for the appropriate and could be keenly sensitive to a scene, which was the fitting background of her own sensations. Okay. And then the underlined portion seems to describe that, about how an enlargement of her present mood, she found something of herself in its calmness. So she's seen how she and nature are kind of like fitting for what she's feeling right now. So let's look at the answer choices. It creates a detailed image of the physical setting of the scene. Not really. That doesn't capture what this question, what the function of this sentence is doing. So we can cross that out. It establishes the character is experiencing an internal conflict. No, it doesn't say that at all. So we can cross that out. And just as a side note, we need to be literal when we're reading these passages and we're reading the answer choices. What I've seen some students do, and myself included when I started out, was I started making my own set of assumptions when I read an answer choice. And then when I got married to an answer, I started justifying why that is true. Don't do that. If it's not there, it's not there, which means it can't be the right answer. C, it makes an assertion that the next sentence expands on. Well, okay, it says the next sentence, let's see what that says. On the nearest slopes, the sugar maple waves wavered like pyres of the light. Lower down was okay, so that previous underlined sentence doesn't do anything with the next sentence. It doesn't expand on it. The next sentence doesn't expand on the underlined sentence. Okay, so we can cross that out as well. So let's see D. It illustrates an idea that is introduced in the previous sentence. Exactly. The previous sentence talks about keenly sensitive to a scene, the fitting background of her own sensations, and then it talks about in the underlined sentence how it was an enlargement of her present mood and she found something of herself in its calmness. So there's the connection there. D is the answer. Question 19 is about grammar. Now, grammar has a whole set of types of questions that it can ask you, like I showed you at the beginning of the video. But this specific question is a great example of if you don't know what this is asking or where to go, that's a gap that you need to build a bridge for so that you go from not knowing it to knowing it. So this problem has a blank, introduced to ask customers whether blank wanted a bag. So I see in the answer choices, we're dealing with pronouns here. it, you, one, they. So I need to go find the noun that we're using the pronoun for and see which one makes the most sense. But if I look at the answer choices, I see that 3 of them are for the singular noun and only 1 of them is for plural. So they deals with plural. They, multiple things. One, you, it, one thing. So let's go ahead and see in the passage which one we are trying to answer for. So if I look here, I see that customers is what we want a pronoun for. Well, customers is plural, which means we have to use a plural pronoun, which in this case is a they. Now, if you had no idea where to go for this type of question, what you would do is you would want to go look at the answer explanations and see what is it testing you on. And then you go from there and say, okay, I know nothing about pronouns. I need to go watch a YouTube video on pronouns or go look at a website on pronouns. And it's that type of process that you would do so that when you finally learn about that, you can come back to this question and know exactly what it is testing you on. You know what pronoun to use and you know what you're looking for. This is the process that you would use for every single question. It's repeatable. It's a system. You can do it for any question on reading and writing or math. So the next type of question you'll see on the reading and writing section of the digital SAT is dealing with graphs and charts. Now this is a longer question, so for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of summarize what it's asking and what it's showing. Which choice best describes the data from the table that supports the researcher's claim? So first things first, I need to go read the passage and find out what the claim is. So the claim is that the plants of these species that grow in close proximity to other plants gain an advantage at an early developmental stage. So what this is saying is that plants that grow together grow more. It's beneficial, okay? That's what the chart is showing. It's showing the results of an experiment. Now let's take a look at what they expected to happen. They expected that only about 15% would be with other plants in patches of vegetation. But if we look at the chart, everything is well above 50%, and 50 is greater than 15. Okay, so let's take a look at the answer choices and see which one of those match what is going on and support the data. So for all 5 species, less than 75% of juvenile plants were growing in patches of vegetation. Well, that doesn't really support or show the relationship between that 50% was greater than 15 and that things grew closer together in patches of vegetation, so that crosses that out. The species with the greatest number of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was the H. stoicus. Again, that doesn't support the claim that we're going after, which is that that the species that grow in close proximity to other plants gain an advantage at an early developmental age, and that we think that it would be 15% would be with other plants in patches of vegetation if they were randomly distributed. So that doesn't do that. C, it doesn't do that either for different reasons. And D, for each species, the percentage of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was substantially higher than what would be expected if plants were randomly distributed. What this is saying is that 50% is greater than 15% because we expected 15%, but we got 50. So D is the correct answer. The next type of question is a literal comprehension question, which states that you read something and then it's going to ask you, what does that mean? What does it say about this person? So you need to read it and then understand literally what it is saying and then look at the answer choices and see which one matches what the question is asking you. So let's take a look here. According to the text, what is true about mother? So we're looking for true things, not false things. So if we read here, it's talking about she did not spend her time doing dull things. She liked to play with the children, read to them and help them do their lessons. She wrote stories for them while they were at school and read aloud. So she wrote stories, read them aloud, made up funny pieces of poetry, but she did not spend her time doing dull things with dull ladies. And so she liked to be around her kids. So if we look at A, it says she wishes that more ladies would visit her. It does not say that in the passage. So we can cross that out. Birthdays are her favorite special occasion. Now we want to be tricky here. There's something tricky here. It says favorite. That's pretty extreme language. And if we look at the passage, it says that she did things for their birthdays and other great occasions, but it doesn't say anywhere that it was her favorite. So again, we have to be literal on the digital SAT. We can't be making up assumptions and trying to justify why it should be correct. So B is out. C, she creates stories and poems for her children. That is true. Put a star next to that. Reading for her children is her favorite activity. Again, she does enjoy reading to them, But she also enjoys writing stories for them. She enjoys making up funny pieces of poetry for them, and then also reading to them. But it doesn't say anywhere that that's her favorite, is reading to them. It doesn't. So for that reason, D is out. And C is our answer. This next type of question is a notes question. So basically some student took some notes, and then the question is asking you with the notes, which answer choice does X, okay? The trick with these types of questions is to make sure that the answer choice does exactly what the question wants you to do. And a lot of times you don't even need to look at the notes, and that's what we're gonna do in this example right here. So the student wants to present the study and its findings. So our answer choice has to present the study and its findings. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? So let's just go down the answer choices and see which one presents the study and its findings. In 2021, they studied jawbones and was initially unsure if the bones belonged. Nope, that doesn't present the study and it doesn't present its findings. Jawbones located in the Sahara Desert were the focus of a 2021 study. Okay, it presents a study, but it doesn't present its findings, so that's out. In a 2021 study, check. They used advanced microscope techniques to analyze the jawbones of dinosaurs, flying reptiles that existed millions of years ago. It presents a study, it tells you what they did, but it doesn't present its findings. So for that reason, C is out. Now D, in a 2021 study, check. Determined that jawbones located in the Sahara Desert. Oh, it says a keyword here, determined. Determined is just equivalent to their findings. So without even reading further, we've already crossed out the other three, and this presents the study and its findings. D is the correct answer. This next type of question is a strengthen or weaken question. Basically, there's a passage, there's a question that's asking you what of the answer choices directly strengthens the passage or weakens the passage's claim. Okay, so what you need to do is read the passage, figure out what the claim is, and then look at the answer choices and which one strengthens it. So which of the findings, if true, would most directly support the student's claim? So now we have to go look at the passage and figure out what the claim is. So a student claims that the photographs have considerable ethnographic value. Chomby was able to capture diverse elements of Peruvian society representing his subjects with both dignity and authenticity. So the claim is that the photographs show the diverse elements of the Peruvian society. So we need to look at the answer choices and see which one of them that, if true, represents that claim. So A, took many commissioned portraits of wealthy Peruvians, but he also produced hundreds of images carefully documenting the people, sites, and customs of indigenous communities of the Andes. Well, that sounds like it has a considerable ethnographic value, and they were able to capture diverse elements of Peruvian society. So let's go ahead and keep A. B, the photographs demonstrate a high level of technical skill as seen in his strategic use of illumination. That's more obsessed with his technical skill. That doesn't talk about the diverse range of his photography. So B is out. During his lifetime, Chomby was known and celebrated both within and outside his native Peru, as his work was published in the places like, again, I don't even have to finish reading it to know that that doesn't talk about how he's representing the Peruvian society and showing its diversity. And then some peoples and places Chomby photographed had long been popular subjects for Peruvian photographers. Again, that's great that Peruvian photographers also took photos at these places and areas and subjects, but it doesn't get to the core of what the claim is that his photographs showed the diverse range of the Peruvian society, high class, lower class, different elements of living in Peru. So A is indeed our answer. So 17 is a text completion type of question. What this states is that there's a long thing written, and at the very end there's a blank, and it wants you to say which one of these sentences or answer choices best fits in that blank, given everything else you see in the passage and whatever the question is asking you to do. So let's take a look. So which choice most logically completes the text? So for the sake of time, I'll sum this up. Basically, it's saying that dinosaurs were big, and they said because there was high levels of carbon, so because carbon was up, there was a lot of plant production, so plant production went up, and because of that, these specific dinosaurs, got really big. Okay, so that's the logic there. Carbon's up, plants get more plants grow, dinos get big, okay? But then it says, however, there is no evidence of significant spikes in carbon dioxide levels coinciding with relevant periods in this sauropod evolution. So what they're saying is that carbon was actually leveled, yet plant production was up, and dinos still got big, okay? So let's look at the answer choices and see which one of those fits the model that we're reading here, which is carbon, no spike in carbon, dino still got big from eating a lot of plants. So, A, fluctuations in atmospheric carbon dioxide affected different sauropod lineages differently. It doesn't talk about any of that in the passage about how it affected different lineages. The evolution of larger body size in sauropods did not depend on increased atmospheric carbon dioxide. This looks to be true because remember, they still got big and they found there was no evidence of a spike in carbon. So still got big, no spike in carbon, which means it didn't rely on the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So let's star that. C, atmospheric carbon dioxide was higher when the largest known sauropod lived than it was when the first sauropods appeared. Again, no evidence for that. D, sauropods probably would not have evolved to such immense sizes if atmospheric carbon dioxide had been even slightly higher. Again, no evidence of that in the passage. It doesn't even mention that. So we can't be putting words in the passage that don't exist. Remember, we have to be very literal with the digital SAT here. So in this case, B is the correct answer. Okay, the last type of question you'll see on the digital SAT in the reading and writing section is a paired passage question. Again, this only makes up around 1.5% of the total questions you're gonna see on the reading and writing sections, modules 1 and 2 for the digital SAT, but every point matters, so we're gonna go ahead and take a look at an example here. So we have text 1, text 2. Text 1 is essentially saying they're excited about finding, oh, that looks evil. They're excited to see this link in the early growth response, linked to regeneration, because they saw that humans had it and earthworms had it. So they're like, oh yeah, we chopped a worm in 3 pieces and it grew into 3 other worms. Maybe we could chop a human's arm off and then it'll regrow somehow. All right, so they're excited about that. What text 2 is saying is that although they possess a gene for EGR, the team pointed out that the genes likely function very differently in humans than it does in panther worms. So what they're saying is that yes, they're in both the worms and humans, but they act differently. You can't just go around chopping people's arms off and they'll regrow, just like if you chop that worm in half and it creates 2 different worms, okay? So, based on the text, what would author of text 2 most likely say about text 1 characterization of the discovery involving EGR? So we already know text 2 would probably tell text 1, slow your roll. It doesn't work like that, so you don't need to get that excited, but it is still something to potentially look into. So let's look at the answer choices. A, it is reasonable given that Siri Vastava and her team have identified how EGR functions in both humans and panther worms. No, that doesn't really give the tone that they would most likely give because, again, text 1 is super excited and text 2 is more dull of like, okay, that's cool that they have it, but it works differently in earthworms or panther worms than in humans. So A is out. B, it is overly optimistic given additional observations from Siristava and her team. Yeah, overly optimistic. You're way too happy about this. It's not that serious, but it's still worth looking into, but they work differently. So let's keep B captures what text 2 would most likely tell text 1. C, it is unexpected given that Sirivastava and her team's findings were generally met with enthusiasm. Well, that doesn't really make sense. It is unexpected given that her team's findings were generally met with enthusiasm. That's not something that text 2 would most likely say about text 1 characterization. So that really doesn't make any sense at all given what the question is asking. So for that reason, C is out. And then D, it is unfairly dismissive given the progress that Siristava and her team have reported. Well, again, would text 2 tell text 1 that they're unfairly dismissive? No, text 1 is excited about these findings. They want to go further and deeper into it. Text 2 is the one that's saying slow your roll. So D is out. So B is the correct answer. Now we've just looked at all of the different types of questions that you will see in the reading and writing section on the digital SAT. And you saw how for each answer choice, I went down and I didn't just circle the correct one. I forced myself during practice to cross out why each answer choice was either correct or why it was wrong. So once you do your practice problems, you want to make sure you go through And for each answer choice, why is it right? Why is it wrong? Why is it wrong? Why is it wrong? And in doing so, you will realize what you actually know and what you actually don't know. And then from there, you can bridge that knowledge gap by doing some more research on Google, YouTube, any resource you might have to bridge that knowledge gap and then crush the digital SAT. All right, see you in the next video.